Well, of course, you're right. The festive season is not a surprise to anybody. In fact, to answer a lot of the unanswered questions at this point, we have joining us Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor of the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Sanyal, I'm very grateful for your time here at Mirror Now, and I know our viewers will be grateful as well. If you could please explain to us what's causing the crunch, and we've noticed it's only in a few states. What's causing the cash crunch right now? Because it can't be the festive season. Like Kavita pointed out, the festive season is not a surprise for anyone.
Not at all. I don't think this is the festive season at all. There has been, as the Finance Minister pointed out, some very sudden and unusual spurt in demand in a few states, beginning with Karnataka and Telangana, and then spreading to neighboring states and now in other parts of the country as well. So this sudden demand has spurted in the last few weeks. And while it was a little bit of a surprise to start with, but nevertheless, the government is fully aware of this and is responding. The Reserve Bank and the Finance Ministry are coordinating on this, and we will sort it out. There is absolutely no reason to panic in any way about this.
Mr. Sanyal, you said specifically to do with Karnataka, there's a sudden demand. Do you think this may have to do with the upcoming elections in the state of Karnataka?
Well, we don't know exactly what, so I would not like to speculate exactly who or why this sudden spurt of demand for cash has happened. That only an investigation will show. But yes, some of it there have been speculation that there may be some coordinated or political reason for this. But as I said, I would not like to speculate on this at all.
When we say sudden demand, normally from a bank account, one can withdraw a limited amount of money through your ATM depending on the nature of the account that you have, and a limited amount of money from the bank branch, again depending on the account that you have. So how could there have been a sudden demand that would surprise the banking system?
See, usually there's a circulation of this money. So money goes out, some of it comes back. So it's only, you have to keep topping up that amount. What is happening is that a lot of the cash, particularly higher denomination notes in some cases, are not coming back. And in any case, there has been in these states that I mentioned, net outflow and fairly large amounts. So this has caused, what I said, some disruption. But it's not like we don't have the notes. It's just that because it happened so suddenly and because it was unusual, we took some time to respond. But we have the notes, and more will be printed where necessary.
So one of the responses that have been doing the rounds of this, or the possible theories, is that the 2,000 rupee notes are missing from circulation. Is that true? Are there fewer 2,000 rupee notes available to the general public than were printed?
Well, there is some extent that we have been sort of not been printing. I think the Finance Secretary or the DEA Secretary had pointed out that the printing of 2,000 rupee notes had been slowed down recently as the printing of other notes had been ramped up. So, there may be a case that also that some of these 2,000 rupee notes were being hoarded in some fashion. But the fact is that, if more cash is needed, we are there to provide it. So I don't think, other than short-term disruption, this is going to cause any real problem.
Well, let me go back to what you said about the possibility of 2,000 rupee notes being hoarded. There is a tendency, of course, to hoard the largest denominator and denomination, and 2,000 is fairly convenient for anyone who does want to hoard cash. Would this then be a failure of the demonetization exercise if after, over a year after demonetization, we've discovered that people are still hoarding cash in our country?
As I said, I would not like to speculate on it. Eventually, this is a matter to be investigated and based on evidence to draw conclusions. I wouldn't like to do what economists very often do, is to take a data point and then make grand extrapolations based on it. So Let's wait for trying to sort of pinpoint exactly what caused this sudden spike. For the time being, as a policymaker, what we need to do is to respond to the fact that there is a shortage and to make sure that the cash reaches where it needs to.
Also, when you say you're going to respond to the shortage, where is the money going to come from now? Because if there has been a sudden outflow of cash in Karnataka, the only thing extraordinary about Karnataka is the upcoming state elections. Where will the money come from now? Does the government have enough cash in reserve to make up for, for the demand?
Yes, the Reserve Bank always keeps significant amounts of cash in reserve. In addition to that, more can be printed. So it's not like we cannot provide the cash where it's needed. It's a matter of taking cognizance of the situation and responding to it. And in fact,
yes.
a response committee a team has been created to do exactly that.
Mr. Sanyal, pumping in more liquidity in this manner, do you think it will have an immediate impact on inflation? Because that's also something the Reserve Bank keeps a very close eye on.
Well, there is a link between cash and inflation, but you see, one has to be careful about drawing too many conclusions from a few data points. First of all, if you do take this cash and begin to spend it, for example, which is what would impact inflation, then this cash, some of it would come back into the banking system. So you can't say that there's hoarding on one side and say that there's inflationary pressures on the other. If you hoard it, then you won't get the inflationary pressure in the first place because it's not being spent. So you can have one or the other.
Right. And my question to you, Mr. Sanyal, is from early this morning when the problem surfaced that we are having a cash crunch in this country, various agencies of the government, 4 different statements came out and they were all contradictory, almost as if we hadn't figured out what the problem is. Does the Finance Ministry have a handle on this situation right now, or are we still trying to guess?
Well, we do have a handle on the fact that there is a cash shortage, and the Reserve Bank of India and the Finance Ministry are coordinating to make sure there's enough cash adequately in the places that it is needed. So that we have a handle on. We also want to assure everybody that this is absolutely no link to any solvency problem with any bank. If anything, we have improved and begun cleaning up our banks. There's a huge amount of auctions and successful ones that have been done through the IBC process in recent weeks, and the banks are on the mend. So again, please do not sort of begin to attach it in any way to solvency of banks and those kinds of issues. What we are not dead sure about, which I pointed out earlier, is that we are not dead sure about exactly what is causing the spurt in cash demand. But for the time being, while we investigate the matter, we will make sure that whatever reason this demand may be coming from, we will meet it.
Right.
So there will be cash with whoever needs it for whatever reason at the ground level.
You did say, of course, that you're not sure what's causing this added demand. Will that then lead to an investigation? You suggested an investigation in one of your earlier answers as well. Is the ministry or the government looking into investigating where this money is going, or who basically took it out of the system?
Well, I did not mean an investigation is an intellectual exercise. It does not mean that we are going to get investigative agencies involved as such, or that there's anything criminal going on. These things are, remember, economic dynamics always, there are all kinds of spikes that happen along the way. So there is absolutely no reason even to believe that there is anything particularly criminal going on. So when I use the word investigation, I meant it in the general term of looking into the matter and analyzing it. So what we have is a sudden spike in demand for cash, which is unusual, and we are responding to it firsthand by accommodating that demand, and then we will look into why it is happening. Is it a permanent thing? Is it a one-time thing? And then accordingly we will respond. It's an ongoing thing. I remember every economy is continuously buffeted by all kinds of new dynamics. And if for whatever reason this is a new dynamic we now need to take into account in our policy making, we will make that adjustment.
Has this ever happened before? And if yes, how often?
Well, no. I mean, this is certainly something that is, not very common that you have this side of spike. Given that this is not really festival season in that sense. I mean, the real big festival season happens in October, November. So this is I think, certainly unusual.
So my question to you then is, if it is that unusual, could you tell us what the quantum of the demand was, the unusual withdrawal that the government is referring to? What kind of money are we talking about?
So I think, if I remember the numbers right, which I think the DEA Secretary Subhash Garg came up with, so don't hold me to them, but this is what I think I remember, is that about 45,000 crores or thereabouts was pulled out in the last 3 weeks. But I don't hold me to this number. I think he came up with a number just a little while ago.
And is 45,000 crores then, difficult for our banking system to handle or to absorb?
No, not at all. It's a matter of something that, first of all, remember, we can't predict exactly which part of the country this sudden spike will happen. So it happened in a few places. It has now become more widespread, but it was originally concentrated in one small part of the country. And, as I said, we are more than capable of dealing with it.
And 45,000 crore rupees, I'm not holding you to the number, thereabout, being withdrawn in cash from our system. Would you personally say that merits an investigation, a criminal investigation by our agencies?
It doesn't. Absolutely not. That's the point I'm making to you. Is that we will analyze it. That doesn't mean that investigation in the sense of doing some criminal investigation. Please don't go off.
No, but I'm asking you, shouldn't it merit a criminal investigation? I mean, post demonetization, we're now facing a problem.
No, not unless.
Yes, go ahead.
Look, any economy, not just our economy, every economy suffers from, is buffeted by all kinds of shocks along the way. So it is not that, while most of the time it remains in some sort of a general track, it sort of shifts around. It's an organic beast. So just because something unusual happens doesn't mean you suddenly begin to, rush in the investigative agencies. First of all, let us see what happens as it evolves. The first thing we need to do is to accommodate this demand for whatever reason it may be there. Mm-hmm. Secondly, watch to see what happens to it as it pans itself out. And should there be a need to do whatever type of investigation necessary, but at the first order is not to rush in criminal investigation. First order thing is to look at why this is happening, get the data in, where exactly it is happening, analyze it economically.
Well,
this rush to put in criminal investigation at everything is not a good idea, surely.
No, I'm a little surprised because on one hand, we've had state elections.
That too.
In various parts of the country. We've never run out of cash before, and from the ATMs. And, it's not a system of people transferred a lot of money. Cash came out of the system, and we ran out of cash in at least 4 different states. And people are distressed at this point. It's bringing back, I must be honest with you, memories of the demonetization process.
So, if necessary...
the fact that the government doesn't have a clear explanation of what is going on between the RBI and SBI and the Finance Ministry is gravely, a cause for concern.
As I said, we are watching what is happening. Jumping to conclusions is not a good idea. We have, obviously, some theories about what is happening, and we may even have some idea of what is happening. But the first order of response must be to fulfill the demand and make sure the ATMs function so that people who have genuine needs for transaction or whatever reason they want cash, have that cash with them. That has got to be the first order of response. The second order of response is to watch what happens. We have some idea why this is happening, but as I said, there is no need to panic. and there certainly is no need to jump to any conclusions about this.
So you said the first order of business would be to provide the amount of cash that ordinary citizens would need. How long do you expect for this to take? By when can we expect these ATMs to be refilled and people to have access to cash again?
Within days.
Is that 2 days, 3 days?
You will have this matter has been now, well, it's difficult for me to say exactly, but certainly the matter is now top of the agenda in both the Finance Ministry and in the Reserve Bank. The amount of cash required is available and more is being printed, and it's now a logistical problem to get it to the relevant ATMs and make sure they're filled up.
Your second order of business, according to you, was to watch and see what happens. How long do you think the government is going to watch to see? How long will the watching take? A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before you decide what your next course of action will be?
Well, I do not want to respond to that. I mean, obviously, that will depend on what sort of information we can gather and how we go about it. So I will not like to preclude what the next steps will be. I'm afraid you'll have to let me go because I have another appointment.
Yes, of course. Mr. Sanyal, I appreciate your time. Again, thank you for joining us here on Mirror Now and clarifying those questions. I'm sure our viewers appreciate as well the clarity that you offered us. I wish you a good day. That was Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor to the Finance Ministry.